But the best software engineers I know look at the artifacts they get from Claude Code, and they're like, the code kind of sucks. Every new wave of technology that comes along adds complexity, doesn't take it away. There's going to be a ton of money to be made in implementation. Adapting this technology to specific business problems, get close to customers, understand what people are really trying to solve.
Today, I'm joined by Woodson Martin, CEO of Outsystems, which is the leading AI-powered low-code platform. We talk about agentic workflows. What value have they delivered at customers in production, and how do they keep the human in the loop? Woodson gives us a behind-the-scenes overview of things like go-to-market, retention, hiring, strategy, and much, much more. And lastly, we talk about what to focus on as software engineer right now. So enjoy. Where does it leave the humans when we're talking about agents doing their thing autonomously? Is there a person that orchestrates and that can intervene, or are they only there for the more human steps of the workflow?
Totally depends on the process. I think this, we'll talk about the Travel Essence example. They've been able to take, these hours of back office work and redeploy those travel planners to the front office engagement with the customer, right? So when the system does a lot of the work that was previously taking them time, they now get to spend more time actually selling the result of that planned itinerary to that customer. So they book with Travel Essence instead of somebody else, right? Because you're always competing. And so if you can put more of your human energy into the relationship with the customer, in that particular case, hyper valuable. And so what do the people do? The people spend more time with customers, drive the bookings up, and they're experiencing a 20% growth on the back of this agentic system definition. Super exciting story right here nearby in the Netherlands. But there are stories like this happening around the world in all kinds of other domains. I love the story of Griham Housing Finance, which is based in India and a company that does mortgage finance for low-income people in India. The government in India has been subsidizing mortgage rates, trying to drive home ownership throughout the country. And so there is a huge surge in volume of mortgage applications for people trying to buy their first home. And to cope with this surge, the Griham Housing Finance team did the same thing. They took an app that was running on Outsystems, which was their loan origination system. So this is where a customer goes to a website, uploads a copy of their pay stub, their bank account, right? The insurance policies, the other things that go along with a mortgage application. And instead of a underwriter, a human who's working for the Griham Finance and opening each of these documents, evaluating them, tabulating the data in them, entering them into a system, checking against the rules to see if they meet the criteria for approval of the loan, they've converted that to an agentic system now where there are 4 or 5 software agents that open the files, do the data entry, calculate the decision on whether they're eligible, make a recommendation, and then a human does the final check.
Gotcha.
Right? And so they get a recommendation. And then they have another agent, the communication agent, that then goes and assembles the response to the applicant. It's like, you've been approved or you haven't been approved. And apparently kind of when the humans need to intervene, which is only 2% of the time now in the application process, it's usually because somebody scanned the back side of the paper, right? It's the bank account, they stuck it in the scanner upside down. So you can just kind of sort of see it through there. And so you need a human to call back and be like, hey, we didn't get quite all the paperwork we need. Let's try this one again. And so you're able to spend more energy on managing that customer relationship and a little less on the grunt work underneath. And it drives productivity and allows them to get mortgages approved for a lot more buyers in the Indian market. So I think that's just another example of how we're seeing rapid advancement in some of these processes with agentic systems.
I was thinking that when companies would start with agentic workflows, they would kind of look towards low-hanging fruit. But it turns out that the crucial workflows that they have, typically those are also still use cases for agentic workflows in general.
I think you see them everywhere. I mean, it's kind of exciting when you get to talk about the ones where the agents are having a direct impact on the end customer experience, which is pretty cool. But then we've got other customers. I think about a customer called Axos Bank. They're a digital bank based in the US, and they built everything. They build all their systems on Outsystems. It's an amazing story, front end of the bank, the back end of the account management system. And they're using our agent workbench to actually build agents that do log processing on the apps that are running on our platform. So it's very kind of IT internal agentic system. And they're using that to help identify potential problems in performance, data structure optimization, et cetera. And so it's very, very deep in the internals of the applications where they're using the agents. Whereas, others are choosing to focus directly on end customer experience or something else. So it's really all over the map what we're seeing people do.
Yeah. I want to learn more about kind of the perspective of software engineers in that place, because we mentioned low code specifically and agent platforms. Do you also see that paired with high code?
Yeah, sure. I mean, most of our customers, we don't have a single customer who is 100% anything, right? First of all, most of our customers are relatively sophisticated enterprises who have decades of IT assets in their portfolio, some of which they built from scratch, some of which they bought as SaaS applications, as subscriptions, some of which they've built on a low-code platform like Outsystems. And we've got many customers who have not only our low-code platform, Outsystems, but also have other low-code platforms in place. Almost everybody's got some Salesforce or some ServiceNow, and right, it's pretty common to find a mix. And so, we see projects that are a blend too, right? So some, for example, we've got a lot of customers. If you go to Asia today and you pick up a mobile phone from any Southeast Asian mobile phone provider, the application you use to sign up for your account is going to be an app written on the Outsystems platform, right? And the bank and the website for that telco where you go in and manage your account is going to be written in Outsystems. That's just like a super common pattern we see. And many of those projects are a blend of low code where they've built the core provisioning APIs, for example, on our service. And some of the front end of those things might be super highly customized and written in custom front end code by a high code developer, integrated deeply into the Outsystems platform. So it's pretty common for us to see a mix in these projects of high code and low code, and of even a mix of low code platforms.
Very early on in my career, I joined a training. It was my manager at the time, and I had left the company, and he wanted to start his own company. And it was a training specifically about a low-code platform, Dutch one. I don't even know the name. But back then I was like, do I want to be a low-code engineer? Do I want to work on these integrations? I love solving business problems, and I don't necessarily think about how to do it. But then I also was like, I don't want to confine my career within this platform specifically. If I'm going to build up these skills that are very much tailored towards a platform, how am I going to leverage that in any other platform if this platform falls and becomes obsolete? What is your take in currently people considering low code as career paths, or what would you advise them to consider in the first place?
I mean, I think I start with the question of what kind of work do you want to do, and what kind of impact do you want to have? I think most software engineers are going to develop skills with a wide variety of technologies and platforms, right? I think if you were to go today and say, I'm going to be a low code engineer and that's my plan for the rest of my career, I'm not sure that's really wise. I think you want to be an AI engineer. I think you want to be a high code engineer. I think you want to be a low code engineer. I think you want to know how to take advantage of the right tool for the right job. And I think that's probably what's the smartest folks are thinking when they think about how to build. Developers are successful when they leverage abstractions, right? Like if you were to you got to do system set of requirements you got from somebody in the business, and they're like, hey, we need an app to do this. And you're like, let me start at bare metal and build up from that. Like, you're not going to be a very productive software engineer, right? You're going to say, well, what are the tools? What are the platforms that I can use that get me closest to the goal right out of the box and allow me to spend my precious time and energy on getting exactly the right answer using those platforms and tools. And I think that's the way really both smart organizations and smart developers think about using the technologies available to them. And so I wouldn't say like you got to think about like picking a path for your career that's based on one set of tools forever. I think that would probably be a naive way of thinking. And I don't meet very many people who have organized their career in that way.
Yeah. As I mentioned, it was very early on in my career path, and I'm happy with the path that I have. I feel like nowadays, when we're talking about agents, and even when I'm creating software, I'm already working with agents. I'm trying to max my productivity on a local side. And I feel like when I hear the customer workflows that you're talking about, agentic, I'm like, man, we can do a lot more with a lot less. And then I feel like, what am I going to do with my career? Is what I'm working on now, is it still valuable towards the future? I still get questions from graduates. Is this even a good career path, software engineering? Or am I going to get outpaced by technology and are my skills going to become obsolete? I'm wondering what your perspective is on that.
I mean, I think this is just it's a fascinating set of conversations. I mean, first of all, I think there are people who believe that AI is going to magically solve all problems. And then I think there are people who understand, and there's a lot of people in enterprise IT, right? People who have built and managed complex systems in the past who recognize that every new wave of technology that comes along adds complexity, doesn't take it away.
Yeah.
Right. And the challenge of managing enterprise systems in the future won't be the same as it was yesterday, but it also isn't going away. We raise the premium on architecture, on system design, on security, as it just gets easier and easier to generate code. I think if you think of software engineering as a discipline, some portion of that is the generation of code, right? My son is a software engineer, studies software engineering in school, works professionally as a software engineer, is like writing code is 20% of my job, right? 80% of my job is everything else. It's planning, it's coordinating with other teams, it's doing system architecture, it's going through code, it's going through the architecture reviews with other people, it's integrating systems. Like there's a lot of complicated work that has nothing to do with like code gen. And code gen is getting easier because AI knows how to generate code, right? But it's not really doing much to the other 80% of the work. And so I still think that software engineering as a discipline has a bright future. I think the exact skills that you're going to need 20 years from now, 100 years from now, as a software engineer are going to be different than the ones from 20 years ago. But I think it's still going to be fascinating work. It's still going to be one of the most exciting disciplines. And I think the power of the AI technology of today that we see is just going to actually make it more fun and more interesting, take away some of the tedium and let you focus on the really interesting parts.
That's really my hope. And I hope that it's going to come true. What I've seen in practice is when companies figure out agentic workflows, things automated where processes used to take hours manually, they typically let go of people because they can run in a leaner way. And I hope that organizations, instead of doing that, figure out how they can make the most out of the people that they have. Instead of being leaner, figure out how to do more and even more effectively with the people that they have. Except that's not a trend that I've seen. I've seen big tech organizations cut people by the thousands. And then my hope is that we have more organizations and more people that self-start, which I also think is now very possible. I'm not just a software engineer. I can spin up agents and have conversations with agents in agentic ways, or have them talk and just observe and learn from that, not just from a software engineering perspective, but also product. If I know nothing about marketing, I now have a buddy which knows a lot about marketing, at least more than me. So I can self-start and I can self-create also more so than I used to.
I love that fact about what we're seeing in the world today. The solo entrepreneur who can build $1 billion business, right? This idea that's pretty cool. I don't think there are going to be thousands of those. I think that's going to be an exception, but it's an exciting disruption that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I think in general, right now the market is in the throes of a lot of change. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen, how it's all going to look. There's a lot happening in the market at the same time, macroeconomics, global instability, the rise of AI, all these things blend together in the decisions of organizations about what to do with the workforce and where to invest and disinvest. I think we'll see some of that stabilize as we figure it out, right? And I think most businesses, the charter is to grow. And to grow profitably, and we'll figure out new ways to generate profit. We'll figure out new ways to grow, but it's not necessarily going to be the same companies who did the growing before. And we will see change and turnover, and there'll be disruption. The thing I would say is, if you're thinking about a career in this space, is just get close to the tech, get close to it. Lean in, innovate. Maybe that turns into an entrepreneurial opportunity for you. Maybe it turns into a job for you. Maybe it turns into a contract for you with a company that has an exciting new project. But lean in and explore the technology. I've never seen a time or a place in my career. I'm 30 plus years into this business. It's not a perfect barometer for all of history, but I've seen the rise and fall. I've seen a few of these disruptions come and go. What I can say for certain is that the opportunities keep appearing, right? And you're close to the tech, and you understand how it's being used, and you understand how it impacts humans and the way humans operate, and you understand, learn about the business, what drives the revenue, learn about the customers, and what drives their appetites. And you're going to be in a good place to take advantage of opportunities as they come along. They'll be different than the ones our parents chased. But they'll be exciting. And anyway, I'm an optimist on these things.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Like, even though I feel like the market is a little bit tough now for software engineers, I have friends that are looking for a job. It's harder compared to, for example, COVID times. There are still a lot of companies hiring, and they're looking for seniority. People that have done things or that have seen the things, have burnt themselves a little bit too much to know what is apt and what is not, especially with newer technology. And those people will be trailblazing newer solutions. I also feel like, especially in a market like this, companies are going to look more towards retention. So it's hard to attract really good talent, but once you have them in, how do you make sure they're happy with what they do? I feel like clarity from a product side, actually realizing the work that I do has meaning, that has always been a big factor in at least my personal fulfillment. But I'm curious to hear how you look into retention specifically.
Yeah, great question. So for me, this matters a lot. We've got a great team at Outsystems. We've got hundreds of software engineers on the team. We're working very actively right now to answer the question of, how do our teams change? How do our jobs change? How does the work change with all this new tech, with AI? And we're seeing some pretty dramatic advancements. Our most recent product that we shipped, Agent Workbench, we took from a concept to a production product in the space of a couple of months, with teams who are working very differently than the teams who have built our platform for the last few decades. We said, where are the bottlenecks in our process? Where can we streamline organizationally roles and responsibilities, right? Like rethinking the structure of teams, the size of teams, to push for much more rapid iteration and for taking advantage of AI. And in the development process, in the software development lifecycle, I figure we're going to build software for managing the software lifecycle with AI. Yeah. We should be doing it that way ourselves. And that's been super impactful for us. So we now have these new teams who have been built around new product strategies and who have been delivering at an incredible pace. And we're asking the question, okay, how can we do that now across the board for all our teams? And it's not like one experiment successful, move on and standardize. We're still learning, right? Yep. And the tech's changing fast. And I think you have to give teams the opportunity to innovate in what they're doing. Nobody wants to be standing still. Nobody wants to just be looking backwards and working on the products of yesteryear. Everybody needs to feel like they've got an opportunity to take advantage of the latest tech, advance their career, be learning new skills. And I think if you're learning and you're growing and you feel like, and you're seeing the technology that you build get adopted by real customers in the real world and having the kind of impact we're talking about here with the agentic systems our customers are putting in place, then I think that's exciting and rewarding, and people want to keep doing that work. And I think that contributes to retention, and keeping the teams happy and motivated and productive.
Yeah, I like the rapidness and the fast-pacedness now in which we can create software. And you mentioned team setting and at least experimenting with different team dynamics has paid off, basically. Are there any learnings you can share with regards to what you've experimented with from a team perspective and what in the end has increased the velocity?
I think probably the biggest increase in velocity for our teams has come from letting the teams analyze the way they work and get rid of bottlenecks. So a big part of that for us was process, and some of it was role definitions, right? We had a model built where we had a product management and a product owner role separated, where one more focused on strategy, one more focused on operational execution, which sounded like a great idea at the time it was implemented, but over time became a bit of a calcification of process. Suddenly there were multiple hops and steps in the prioritization and product planning that would just basically slow a team down, right? So the process of getting feedback from a customer, synthesizing that into a set of priorities, turning that into a bunch of work items, assigning those work items to teams. We're like, whoa, we've added steps here that we don't need because we've given ourselves these extra roles, and the theory that it was going to drive productivity at one end or the other. But in the end, it actually slowed the whole process down. Let's collapse that and get the engineers a lot closer to the customers and take steps out of the process. And I think that is, and it wasn't like a macro decision to do that. It was like, ask the team, like, what would help you go faster? Where are you getting stuck? Where do you see, then it's the retrospective process, sprinting, turning around and saying, how do we do? What can we learn? Get better.
How do you get engineers closer to your customers? Is it by going on excursion and actually visiting them on site, or how do you bring them together, those two?
Well, some on site. I would say these days, a lot of what we need to do there, we can do very virtually. So there's some of that. We've got some new engineers who just started with the team who are diving in deep with customers around specific projects. So these are engineers who work on products. They're not necessarily field engineers, but they're starting by diving deep into customer domains. So a place where we're doing this, for example, right now, we've got a lot of customers who are trying to do legacy modernization. They've got old COBOL apps in their enterprise.
Still running.
They're 60 years old. They've got nobody left who knows how to manage or maintain them. And they're saying, how do we modernize these things on a platform like Outsystems? And we're asking the question, like, how can we do that? How can we use AI to help us do that? And how do you use AI to reason over the existing code? In some cases, they don't even have the original source code. They've just got the compiled assets. So how do you use AI to break that down? How do you use AI to study the artifacts of that system, its existing screens, and determine and reason through logic, and then help teams modernize, right? Because nobody wants a copy of a 60-year-old COBOL app to just run on a new platform. They actually want it to do different things today, and they want to make it an agentic system. And so those teams are just going on location, working directly with customers to understand their actual context. These are not, it's like, we don't run a lot of COBOL in our lab, right? So to see those kinds of things, you got to get into the field. And so those are just some examples of the ways that we try to keep customers or keep engineers closer to customers. We're also experimenting with the forward deployed engineering model. You see a lot of this out of companies like Palantir. OpenAI is doing it now. Both those companies are like $10 million price tag to get those kinds of engineers into the field. And we're starting to say, how can we take our platform, which gives people a lot more flexibility because it's got packaged capability that allows people to do a ton of customization in their own environment, and how do we deploy forward deployed engineers into customer environments at a much lower cost, where any company can afford the benefit and really get that tight coupling between the engineering mindset and the business problem and the customer domain, and make things just happen faster. And so that's the experiment we're running today.
Gotcha. Did you, before this experiment, not have any forward deployed engineers on staff? Because I've talked to people that have a platform and they need to integrate with companies that either go the partnership route or they have indeed engineers on staff as forward deployed engineers.
We do way more than half of our business through partners
Gotcha.
like Zebia and others who do a lot of the work in the field with our customers today. That's a super important part of our business and how we scale and how we make our customers successful. We also have a professional services team where we have engineers being billed by the hour. And I'd say the difference is, or working on statements of work and complex projects. I'd say the difference between the FDE model and the classic professional services model is often that the outcome is undetermined before the engineer is deployed. In other words, a big part of the FDE model as it exists and has been deployed so far is around solution discovery and figuring out what problem to solve, not just doing the implementation of the problem solving once it's been figured out in advance. And so this is a different model.
Yeah.
And we're trying to learn how applicable that is in our business. We're pretty optimistic from some of the early signals, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah. I'm quite curious, actually, because this feels very similar to not just indeed implementation, but also doing partly consulting, figuring out and understanding your customer domain, their business domain, what drives them.
It's super consultative.
It's completely consultative, but then you have very different engineers on staff, engineers that can actually have that conversation and then also go towards implementation when it matters.
Yeah, I mean, we've long had an incredible team of engineers in our professional services team out in the field, building, deploying, educating, consulting with customers. This for us is less a different skill set and more a different engagement model.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm curious with regards to agents specifically. People are now going towards platforms, and if I look at myself, if I were to build agentic workflows, I can go open source, things like N8N. OpenAI released I think it's called Agent Builder.
Yeah.
But also on Outsystems, I have Agent Workbench. Do you see those as competitors, or how do you see kind of your niche within that agent workspace?
I mean, I think there's 1,000 ways to build agents today, just to be clear. You've named 3. I could name 300 more.
Yeah.
The reality is that every software stack today has an agent toolkit as part of it. And so I think a couple of thoughts I have on this. Like, to me, it's kind of encouraging that OpenAI, as they think about how to monetize in the enterprise, are coming to the realization they actually need a low-code platform, right? To make the models successful in the enterprise. What have they built? If you go look at the Agent Builder, it is a low-code platform. It's a relatively simple one to start. But that's kind of validating for me that, like, actually this future that we think about, which is highly powered by these very sophisticated models, still needs all of the base platform infrastructure for enterprise applications and enterprise systems that we had to build for 24 years to make Outsystems successful, right? Like basic observability, the basic tooling that allows you to go in and deterministically make a change in a system, rules-based systems that you need for enforcing policy that is required for compliance with a government regulation or a contract term. And so the, blend of, non-deterministic or probabilistic systems, most obviously, example there is obviously the models themselves, blended with deterministic systems, right? Rules-based systems, like what we've built for decades in Outsystems. I think it's really, the future is the combination of these things. And I think when we think about what's the Outsystems advantage for customers who are embracing this platform approach, it's really that you get the best of both worlds, right? And you get the depth of functionality it takes to build a secure enterprise system that is governable, monitorable, but also you get the pace of innovation and the pace of processing the learning behavior from AI. And it's really both of those things that you want together. And I think ultimately every CIO and every CISO and every enterprise around the planet is going to come to the realization that actually I need all these things.
Yeah.
And that's why I say I don't think the world gets simpler because of AI. I don't think enterprise architectures get simpler. I think they actually get more complicated. And I think we need tools and we need platforms to help us manage those in simple ways. And that's where Outsystems has always thrived. And that's why I'm excited about our future.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think I've done a complete 180 on that. When ChatGPT first came out, I know a friend and he's been working on this stealth startup, and it was all about code automation. And then I was like, well, this thing kind of does that. And if you see the rapidness of innovation, it does code automation faster and faster. So then I had a conversation with him. I'm like, man, this might just actually kill whatever USP you have. And I honestly thought the same with regards to low code. But now, as you say, if you have building blocks, AI is really good at making use of specific tooling, more boundaries more than ever. And it can use the non-deterministic part to reason about what do I actually use within the tool set that's available. So I think strategically, it's quite smart, actually, this direction that Outsystems has been going. I saw the rebrand from low-code platform to agentic low-code platform. And to me, as outsider, it makes sense.
Oh, good. Glad it's making sense. I think you're right that the platform fundamentals matter. The AI needs to use them, right? So today, I think a lot of AI-driven software development is going straight to code, right? And is kind of ignoring platforms and many of the valuable maybe APIs I've got in my enterprise or existing workflows or data structures, and it's kind of building things from scratch. But I think over time, AIs need to get better at, and it's the job of platform companies like Outsystems to make the AIs better at leveraging the building blocks of our platforms to deliver more reliable, trusted, governable systems for the enterprise. And that's where we're focused.
Yeah. Is that also what you would say to the naysayers? Because I had a person on, it was last week, and they were like, with AI, I don't see a reason to have low code. I can do everything myself. But this was also senior software engineer at the table.
I guess I've known people who've said that about everything always, right? So I do think there's something intoxicating about Claude Code, just as an example, like the ability to express a simple idea and have something incredibly complicated built for you as a result. But the best software engineers I know, the most senior, most experienced, look at the artifacts they get from Claude Code or any other AI, and they're like, the code kind of sucks. Like what I'm doing is I'm building tech debt at a pace, 100 times faster than I could build tech debt before.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it's not good. Like it's great that Claude Code can write code 100 times faster than senior software engineers. But I think we've got to realize that if that just continues to play out, what we're going to have as CIOs, as chief information security officers of big enterprises, is we're just going to have billions of lines of ungoverned code. And that's going to be a mess that we're going to spend a long time cleaning up. And I think one of the other things I know about non-deterministic systems and models and AI in general is it's way better at starting from scratch than it is at dealing with existing assets, right? And so we have to make it good at using the existing enterprise assets. And that's where we think the future lies for Outsystems and for our customers, is a enterprise system, governable, fully knowledgeable of the enterprise context. What are all the APIs in my enterprise? What are all the data sources in my enterprise? What is all the existing workflow in my enterprise? What are the existing user experiences in my enterprise? How can I assemble those? Maybe even in real time, right? With agents that give me innovation at lightning speed, but with the trust and governance and stability and compliance of my existing enterprise assets.
Yeah. There's a lot of people listening with careers in tech mainly software engineers, early to mid-career, some senior. If there's one advice that you can give them before we round off, what would that be in the current age?
It's get close to customers, understand what people are really trying to solve. There's so much hype today that's just purely about the tech. And we're kind of in our own little bubble talking about the magic of models. And so much of what, and there's a huge gap, like I think everybody can see that, between the trillions being invested in AI infrastructure from, generating the energy to power the data centers to train the models, to the build out of those data centers themselves, manufacturing of the chips, that the level of investment there relative to the actual monetization. So monetization has to catch up. Mm-hmm. Monetization can only catch up through actual implementation.
Value.
Like we actually have to do things that are valuable for businesses that generate revenues. And if we don't, then that whole house of cards comes tumbling down, right? All the circular investment is just going to collapse. And so there's going to be a ton of money to be made in implementation, in adapting this technology to specific business problems to help companies generate revenue or just save on costs. And so lean into that. That's my number one thing. Like, go to applied AI and say, how do we solve real problems with this? And this is why I think platforms like Outsystems are really helping people to do that. I watched the Travel Essence thing in 3 weeks go from concept to production and have impact and drive immediate growth for that company. Go do that 1,000 times. You're going to have a very successful career. And that's, I think, where I would steer people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. This was a blast.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you.
Cool. We'll round it off here. If you're still with us, let us know in the comment section what you thought of this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.